Well, I had some pretty massive accusations leveled against me.
What accusations do you fully reject and what do you completely own and take accountability for?
I had no boundaries and I crossed many. I was a liar, not true to my word. I was so selfish and not thoughtful of other people's feelings. I had no idea who I was. I did a lot of bypassing and just riding the wave for a long time. I had to reconcile what my relationship to power, to women, to control, to myself, to God. What's my responsibility here to those that I've actually harmed? How do I repair that if possible? I can see where people would believe that if I could do those things, that I could probably do other things.
So right now I'm in Tucson, Arizona, and I'm about to shoot what feels like a really important interview with Naco Bear.
Forgive yourself. Nobody could do that, just me and myself. But I got it twisted. Oh, I got it twisted.
I first heard Nahko and Medicine for the People about 8 years ago, and I remember being so struck by the music.
I believe in the good things coming, 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 coming. I believe in the good things coming, 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 coming.
It was actually right before I launched this YouTube channel. And since then, Naco's music has been like this guiding force in my life.
Today's a good day for my ego to die. Today's a good day for my ego to die. A spirit live on in my heart, in my body, my mind.
But here's the thing. In 2020, Naco went through a massive public cancellation. Accusations from various women started coming out about his behavior and misconduct. Festivals dropped him, his tour was canceled, fans turned their backs, and his entire career was basically torn to shreds. If I'm being totally honest, even though I'm a fan of his music, at the time, I didn't really get involved and I didn't bother to look into what actually happened. But I've always been curious about the truth. And in preparing for this interview, I've learned a lot. And I wouldn't be doing this interview if I didn't think this was an incredibly valuable conversation to have. One that can shine light on some really important topics that we're going to dive into, including the impact of cancel culture. So in this conversation, we'll uncover what actually went down, and more importantly, what he's learned through walking through that fire.
And so I just rode the wave of it until it all came crashing down.
I know there might be some people who are mad at me for even considering doing a video with Naco, for giving him a platform. And I just have this feeling that this video is important and that his story represents a much bigger issue that we're facing in culture. And I feel there can be a lot of learning through him opening up and sharing this. So I really hope that this video can just be of service to the collective and the way that we approach these conversations and situations so that we can create true healing and reconciliation for everyone involved. I'm meeting Naco during his Take Your Power Back tour, which was supposed to happen in 2020, but got canceled. Take Your Power Back is Naco's album that was released just 2 months before his public fallout. And now 5 years later, he's finally sharing this album live in its entirety. Today, I'll be sitting down with Naco for an interview. We'll also get to see some behind the scenes and the live show happening tonight.
So take your power back for me means to be back in my integrity. It means to have healthy communication, to show up with intentional energy into a space, and to be responsible for my energy as well.
I was reflecting on when I first heard your music, and I realized it was about 8 years ago, right before I launched this YouTube channel.
Oh, wow.
And I remember that I was in Big Sur with a group of friends and we were in a cabin and they were like, "Do you know Naco?" And I was like, "Who's that?" And they put on your music and I was like, "What is this?" And it really struck me. And I remember what I was feeling in that moment, and we were in this cabin together and like it was matching the vibe and the music was just really activating me. And over the past 8 years of doing this YouTube channel, your music has been a consistent theme. And so it's really cool to sit with you here and to just have this conversation. So I would love to, as we're talking about kind of time traveling back to that moment, I would love to time travel with you in this conversation to different points in your life, in your journey. And I want to start with some lyrics that have always spoke to me. The lyrics were deep breaths for a young man learning. When you wrote those lyrics, who were you as that young man learning, and what do those lyrics mean to you now?
I was somewhere around maybe 25, 26 maybe. I was going through a breakup, and I had just driven across country from Oregon to New York, upstate New York, to this little town called Liberty, New York, where my auntie had a summer cabin. I had taken her up on some like work. She was like, I need my house painted, and I had been on this sort of like solo road trip across the country to grieve as well as remember who I was at that time. I remember being in my auntie's house after finishing up doing some painting that day, and I remember sitting there and my dog Coda was laying at my feet. I'm just sipping on some nice wine, and I was just freestyling, I was just feeling my feelings, I suppose, in that moment. And that's when that first line came to me, of I believe in the good things coming.
I believe in the good things coming, 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 coming. I believe in the good things coming, 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 coming.
I just remember feeling it to be such a true statement that I was still such a young man learning, and in the process of discovering who I was, knowing that like the pain I was feeling was temporary, and it felt good to say, I believe in the good things coming, and it felt good to reflect on the fact that here I was, this like young kid, no idea what the future holds,
Deep breaths for a young man learning, 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 learning. Take a walk with the cedars, I'm in cityscape, pink sunset stunning.
Okay, so let's time travel again to your childhood and being a young boy.
Yeah.
Who were you as a young boy, and how did the environment that you grew up in shape who you are?
I was adopted when I was 9 months old. I had no prior memory of my biological family. I was raised with a brother and a sister who were also adopted. My mom was really young when she had me. She was 14, but to the credit of my parents, they really worked really hard and spent a lot of money to make sure that, there was a safe place for me. We pretty much lived in the same place growing up. We moved a couple times, but we were always outside of Portland, Oregon, and very religious household. So I had a real understanding of God from the beginning. I diverted away from that as I got older and learned to appreciate the spirituality that was taught without all the dogma and the doctrine and all this other stuff that got really confusing and as I got older. But as far as the household is concerned and who I was in the house, I was a middle child. As I started becoming aware of myself, I don't know, probably pre-teen, it was pretty obvious that I was different than everybody in my house. I looked different. Everyone's white, I'm brown. My mom, she always, tried to protect me from that otherness, I suppose, in her own way. And I remember I came back from school one day and I was like, Mom, why do I look different than pretty much everybody at school? And she goes, well, God just left you in the oven a little too long. And I was like, oh, that makes sense, for sure. I look back on that now and I LOL real hard because I was like, it's a good old mom euphemism.
For sure. So when she said that, how did you interpret that, and then how did you come to understand what that actually meant later?
I took that as I'm special regardless of the color of my skin, right? And I still, it took me till I was at least in my 20s to start to understand race or understand otherness in that sense, because my parents did a good job at helping me feel at home and that I wasn't different in that sense. I did all kinds of sports and I was really good at sports. But I got tired of being yelled at in sports and gravitated towards music. I started playing piano when I was 6. And so the music part was really like what softened me, I think. Like it really reined me in. There was structure to it. And there was a identity that developed around it where I felt free. And I knew I was good at it, and I knew I enjoyed it. And in fact, it was my first job as well. It was like I started hustling kids in the neighborhood to like teach them piano lessons, and I would teach their parents piano lessons.
You're saying that you had this sense of identity around freedom when you played music that made you feel free. And I would love to learn more about how you related to your identity. You know, when did you first discover you were adopted and understood like who you really are and where you came from before, you know, you entered into this family that raised you?
The first instance of memory that I have was pretty young. I think I might have been like 6 when I remember getting a gift from my other mom, as my mom that raised me would say. It was a birthday gift, and I don't remember it registering as being like, oh, that's a question, what is that? I just remember getting a gift from my other mom and being like, oh, cool, I have another mom. So the adopted part didn't translate for me until I was probably 16, 15 or 16, when I started asking questions. And by the time I was 17, I was very interested in like, so what, wait, what? I was adopted? Okay, wait, tell me more about this. My parents had like a folder, essentially, of like letters that my mom had written to me through the social worker till I was about 6 years old. And then we lost contact. She moved around a lot. But at that point, when I'd gotten the letters, it was like, oh, well, okay, so wait, so I have this other family? All right, so who am I? You know, as a teenager. And about 17, it was when I got those papers and I read all the letters and started to digest who my mom was, you know, through these letters. And she would write to me and say, first thing she'd always say was, I hope you're not mad at me. And I remember thinking, how could I be mad at you? I don't even know you, and I'm fine here. There was about 6 years of letters there and pictures, so I knew I had some sisters and brothers. Didn't know anything about my dad at that point, didn't know how I was conceived. I ended up going, leaving home when I was 17 and ditched the college idea, and then moved to Hawaii, where I joined the Willing Workers on Organic Farms, woofing.
I will go to the volcano, melt my heart in Mauna Kea snow.
So I bought a ticket to Hawaii and was gonna be there for like maybe 6 months, and I ended up staying for 7 years.
Countless ways to feed my kids, countless ways to route my trip. I'll harvest this and replant it, harvest this and replant it. Oh.
And I remember when I got to Hawaii, it was like all these signs of like mom, whose mom, started happening. And so by the time I left after that first year to go back to Oregon to visit my family that raised me, and I had bought my first ticket to Burning Man, I flew back to Oregon, and on the plane, I sat next to this girl from Maui, and we started chatting, and she's like, why are you leaving Hawaii? And I was like, the first thing I thought of was like, I think I'm gonna go try and find my mom. And I kind of just told her the little information I had. And by the time I got off the plane, the last thing she said to me was, it sounds like you're ready to find your mom.
Initiate my mother, God, let her live forever strong.
And literally the next day, I found her. I went home that night. My mom that raised me picked me up, stayed at her house that night. I just got on the internet and was like, Googled her name for the first time ever, if you can imagine. I was like 20 at this point. And this list came up. It was like these links to like sites that you could look for someone who's been adopted, or you could look for, and there was my name and there was my mom's name, and there was a post she'd made looking for me. There was a phone number, there was an address. I called the phone number, it didn't work. The address was like 20 minutes away. And I remember saying to my other mom, I was like, hey, I think I found my mom. I'm gonna go see if she's over there. I'm just gonna drive over there. And I remember her yelling from the kitchen. She's like, all right, good luck. So cash.
And when you ring the doorbell,
Did she open the door? How did you meet her?
It was
How
an
did
apartment
that-
complex,
Yeah.
and there was no one there. And I was like, okay, this seems like a dead end, you know. But I went into the apartment office, and I had a picture of my mom. It was like a movie. I had a picture of my mom, and I said to the lady at the front desk, I was like, do you know this lady? It was a picture of my mom when she was like 16, you know. And the manager of the apartment complex was like, yeah, I know who she is. She moved out 2 weeks ago, and she looks very different. And I remember kind of freezing in my tracks because I was actually talking to somebody that knew my mom, and I was like, well, this is crazy. She gave me her phone number, and I went back out in the parking lot, cold called her, had no plan of what I was gonna say, and she answered the phone, and I said, hey, this is your son, and she hung up on me. She thought it was a joke. So I called her right back, and I was like, no, this is for real, like, it's me, you know. And she starts crying, and I started crying, and she was like a few blocks away, and I drove up, and there she was, there's my mom. It's like, there's my mom, this is crazy. My 2 sisters, my 2 brothers, my 2 sisters' kids. And I remember getting out of the car, and the first thing she said to me through the tears was like, she's like, what do you do? And I was like, I don't know, I play music. And then the first thing that really struck me so hard in the heart was she looked at my feet and she goes, baby, we have the same toes. And I had never heard anybody in my whole life at that point, of course, as a blood relative, relate to anything in my body or my being that was similar. That was the first time I'd felt the hole in my heart, that of recognition of what was missing. I was like, oh, wow, something I can relate to. Oh my God, this is so different, you know? And I remember when we went to go visit my grandmother later that day, I asked her, well, what's up with my dad? And she's like, we're not gonna talk about that. I was like, okay, but like, what happened? And she briefly gave me the synopsis. She was like, yeah, your grandmother prostituted me and, you know, sold me to your dad, and that's how you're here. And I was like, oh shit, okay. And for the next 2 years, that sent me down this like really intense, deep hatred for him because of the pain he'd caused. I wasn't mature enough to be able to separate like who he was, who she was, the things that happened between them, and then who I was because of it. So I just focused my resentment and hurt and anger on him. About 2 years later, I was house sitting in Oregon, and she called me, and it was almost Christmas, and she was like, hey, I just want you to know, I reached out to your biological father's family, and I found them on Facebook, and I let them know that you exist, and apparently your uncle is gonna come down and visit you from Seattle in a couple days. And I said, why'd you do that? And she goes, well, I know that you needed some closure, and I hope this will help you find closure. And sure enough, my uncle came down on Equinox, and first thing he said to me was like, oh, you look just like your dad. And it pissed me off because I was still in that space, you know. And that's when he told me that my dad had been murdered. And in that moment, like, all that stuff like just left. It started to hit me, it just washed down me. I was like, oh wow, I'm never gonna get the chance to like do all this violence stuff that I've been trying to work through. Where I was like really emotional to realize that I'd never get to actually talk to this guy that, you know, I came from. Who I was, or who I thought I was, from these 2 different families, and then to add in my adopted family, you know, the family that raised me. Here I was in this like, in the middle of this like bizarre triangle of families. You know, I had my adopted family trying to tell me who I was supposed to be, follow Christ, go to a conservatory to be a classical musician, you know. And then I had like my mom's family, my biological mom's family, a whole other, you know, world of trauma and of life and culture. And then my biological dad's family, a whole other world of trauma and culture, that I was like, who am I in all of this, you know? And that was the journey that I was on from like 20 to, I mean, till today still. This is for you guys. When does a joke become a dad joke?
When does a joke become a dad joke?
Yeah, when it becomes apparent. Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys. Nahko is short for Nakwese, which has always been in my name legally. It's my second middle name that my grandmother gave me. And I asked her about the name. I was like, where'd you get this name? And she was like, I read it in a book somewhere. And I was like, oh, so it wasn't in a ceremony. Very cool. Awesome. Love it. And I went and found the book. It's a Cheyenne name, and we're not Cheyenne, but it was like one of those Western romance novels where it's like a taboo romance novel where like the cowboy and the Indian princess like fall in love, against all odds. And I had one line in the book, and it said, "I'll go get the horses." It said Nakwese. And I always thought that was cool. I was like, hell yeah.
That's where she got the name.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And I didn't start going by it until I moved to Hawaii when I was like 19.
Okay.
And I was telling a friend of mine a bit about that story, about my family story, and I was telling him about this Indian name that I had, native name that I had. And when I was adopted, they renamed me David, after King David. And so when I was telling him that shit, he was like, dude, that's way cooler than David. You don't look like a David. And I was like, well, okay, that's nice. He's like, why don't you go by that? And I was like, it's too long. People are never gonna get it, And he's like, why don't you just cut it in half? And I was like, what, Naco? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, Nacho, Taco, Narco, Nico, Naco. Sure, why not? And I remember I met his landowner that day. His landowner's name was River, and River was like, I'm River. And I was like, I'm Naco.
It just felt right.
And it sealed the deal. Yeah.
And then
Nakwese means a friendly little bear.
How do you relate to your identity now?
I'm a big believer in everything happening for a reason. And from the jump, from conception to adoption to happening just out of the divine plan to find my biological families, and then to try to discover who I was as a young man. It had all three of those families telling me who I was supposed to be. And then I rose to be quite well known very quickly. And then I had all these other people, fans, telling me who I was supposed to be. When I look back and reflect on it now, I had no idea who I was. And I did a lot of bypassing and just riding the wave for a long time. That said, I did, along the way, there's always people that come along the way that start adding bits of information and indigenous knowledge about identity, relationship to land and water and people, and that came in throughout that time, and really claiming indigeneity coming from such a white world. That really brought me into that first blossoming space of like, oh, I am from this place. I'm from planet Earth, and I also have this connection to this otherness that I want to learn more about. And so I started standing more and more in that indigeneity as well, knowing that I was a mutt, but also knowing that there's something special about me. Okay.
Should we get it? Let's get it. All right. Let's get it.
So, without further ado, I hope he's ready, because I think you guys are.
I'm not ready.
Thanks, bud. That's beautiful, man.
Love it, man. Dreams come true.
It's been late days. Who breathes in a street light? How I shudder, vision was born, working down in the endless storm. We never asked for these. Oh, I did do these. Suffering, now preordained.
So let's time travel again to your rock star, Nahko.
I got my hands up. Follow directions till they shoot us. I'm fucking sick and tired of no justice, no peace. Promise me I'll never pick your body off the streets.
You are growing this audience, you're playing these big stages, and you have, this community and an audience that you're attracting. It's very much the conscious, spiritual, like hippie audience, right? And I read this interview that you did, and I found this really interesting. So these are your words. I want to read it, and I'd love for us to reflect on this, or for you to reflect on it. To counter the godlike image some folks were creating around me in the press and social media and to my face, I'd show up of full playfulness and ego with my shirt off and a bottle of whiskey ready to party. This image was nothing like what folks in the communities I was performing for thought I was going to be like in person. And to be honest, that's what I was going for. There was something so performative within some of these spaces that disgusted me. It felt disingenuous at times, like I was watching bad actors in costumes. I would come storming in with a strong, mischievous energy, seeking to dismantle the spiritual warrior image that was being created in my likeness and piss on its tires. I was suffering and no one seemed to know. I was so caught up in my own performative act of painful rebellion that in many places I just came across like an entitled asshole. I had no idea I was part of the problem. So first of all, as someone who spent a lot of time in this community, I totally relate to seeing some of the performative nature of spirituality and feeling turned off by it. And there's a fakeness to it. And it seems like you were wanting to rebel against that, and people were trying to put you on this pedestal of spiritual teacher because of your lyrics and because of what you perform about in the audience you were attracting. And I find it so interesting that your response was like, I don't accept that. I'm going to just show you that I'm the opposite in a way. So,
and it didn't work for me, because then it just ended up being like, I'm a bad boy now. And they're like, oh, cool, he's a bad boy. But then it was like, the behaviors were so counter to what people were expecting. And granted, it wasn't like I was doing this every single day. But, when I look at the overarching time where it was like, I felt so outside of my element, I felt like an imposter. And so I just rode the wave of it until it all came crashing down, But I was very upset in a lot of ways at that time, because I felt like I wanted my message and my music to be accepted in a mainstream space as well, because I came from folk music, just having that background of folk music as a tool for change, or just music as a tool for change. I felt like I didn't belong in this spiritual, genre place. I was like, what's all this stuff? And I was like, cool, well, this is putting food on my plate, and yet I didn't respect it, I resented it. I remember, feeling really like I didn't really belong there. And yet it was this weird relationship with it where clearly I belonged there because that's where I was, but I didn't feel like I belonged. And so amidst also this whole other crisis I was going through, it was quite the mess to sort of unpack and sort out. And it really created a lasting impression upon certain people in those communities for quite some time,
Okay, so let's time travel again. So in 2020, you had this very public cancellation moment. I'd love for you to share from your perspective what went down at that time.
Yeah. Well, I had some pretty massive accusations leveled against me. And I think that it was such a triggering moment, to receive all of that and read all of it, and to understand what was happening. I had to get through the shock of it all before I could ask myself the hard questions. How did I end up here? What is it about my behavior, and what is it about who I am and what I've been doing with my life that has gotten me to this place where this could even happen? Those were really intense and hard moments. I've never experienced anything like that before in my life. And I've experienced a lot of hard stuff in my life. And I remember calling my auntie, as you do when you're like falling apart, and like I was so angry because I couldn't control the fall. I couldn't change the minds of the people that were believing something. And I called her, and she was like, she said to me, you are braver than your deepest fear. You're wise beyond your years. And I remember pausing and feeling a bit of groundedness in that moment of like, okay, you're gonna get through this, you know. It's gonna take a long time, you know, and you're gonna do some seriously deep excavation and soul reclamation. And through that journey, you will come out of those trenches, you know, but it's gonna take some time, and it's gonna be hard work.
What accusations do you fully reject and say that this did not happen? And what do you completely own and take accountability for?
I reject any and all criminal accusations of any kind, and I take on a myriad of different things that involve behavioral dysfunction. You know, I was a bad boyfriend, I cheated, I was a liar, I was not true to my word, I had no boundaries, and I crossed many. I was so selfish and not thoughtful of other people's feelings. I can see where people would believe that if I could do those things, that I could probably do other things. And in that, that's what I was facing at that time, was like, okay, how do I filter out all the noise? Because there's a lot of noise, so that I can understand where I need to be accountable. What's my responsibility here to those that I've actually harmed? And how do I repair that if possible? The real work for me was all behind the scenes. It was all with actual people that I knew that I'd harmed in some way or another. And it was an interesting experience because there was no like real playbook to go by. You know, there's no like handbook to say, okay, time to, you know, go on your apology tour, you know, to lovers of your past, and not just lovers, but to like family members, to, you know, brothers of mine that I'd, you know, wanted to address behavior that had harmed our friendship. It was, I mean, it generated an enormous amount of doubt on, you know, who I was, naturally, and I had to sit with that and accept that I couldn't change people's minds, you know. I had to actually change my own mind in that sense. It's a really scary place to be in, especially when you already have come from this place of like, where do I belong? I took on like a masculinity coach, never done any of that stuff before. Took on a new therapist, like went immediately into some of those wellness practices that like I knew would be supportive of the unpacking part of things. And that work only continued further in a good way through partnerships, relationships, new relationships, as well as real life practice in real time and face to face with people, where with past girlfriends or lovers, or the extended part of it, to know how to do this thing with people, to communicate, to unpack things, to forgive, to be forgiven. And it really helped find a new pathway for me, a path forward. But it was intense. It still is. But I would say it really grew me up a lot, you know. It was a scary place to be in, because it's really, you got to really pull back the layers and be real vulnerable about who you were in those moments and where those actions and dysfunctions and behaviors came from, and take on, you know, the harm of it, even if it wasn't intended. And there was a big unpacking for me there of the intent versus the impact.
How do I keep myself from falling apart when I ain't never been part of a whole? Somewhere on the line I got disconnected, started losing perspective, I know. I'll admit that I am part of the problem. I'll admit that I am part of the problem.
I think this is really important to clarify, because you never had anyone legally take action against
It
you.
stayed online.
It was all a social media public shaming, and within that you are saying here, oh, there are things that I did and there are ways I treated people and behavior that I was exhibiting that was true amongst this, and there was part that is absolutely not true and not me, but it all got lumped into one.
Yeah, I got the book thrown at me in
And
that way.
all of it was labeled as, oh, this is all true. He's done. We're taking him down. He's deplatformed, canceled, goodbye, silence your voice. And most people probably don't know how that impacted not just you, but your family, your band members, your daughter, your team, your livelihood. How did it impact all of these things?
I mean, it was devastating. It was life-changing, you know. The band and my entire staff, you know, they lost their jobs. We had built something magnificent and something beautiful. And it was like we finally, at this point in our time, we felt like we were like really growing into the positions that we were, you know, we had the privilege to have. And then all my past caught up to me. And so, yeah, it was a tragic moment, you know. People were out of work, so there was a lot of spiraling happening amongst my friends and family.
How was your mental health?
Terrible. It's horrible. I put myself in harm's way for a couple of years there. And there was just more things that were coming into my life at the time, whether it was like, you know, we had these crazy fires in Oregon, my house almost burned down, and family members that were falling off the wagon, other things that were happening, you know, piled on top of like this big social change that was happening in the world. There was so much happening at one time. It was complete chaos. And I went into like one of the darkest places of my life. I considered suicide. I became suicidal for the first time. I'd never, ever thought that I would get to that place where I just wanted to like get out. And the only thing really, anytime I was thinking about just ending it, I would think of my daughter, and her face would come up in my mind, and I would think like, how could I do this to her? What a selfish thing to think about doing this, because what message is that going to send to her that I just gave up in the face of necessary change? And how many times I was like, what do you want me to do? Like, just start over, clean slate? What do you want me to do? Like, you're taking everything from me, you know? So what am I supposed to do now? And the answer was always coming back to like, who are you? Who are you gonna be now? You know, who were you then? How do you address these traumas and these complex traumas and these dysfunctions and these toxic behaviors to truly let that the boy inside of you is an important person, you know. You can't make him go away. He's always going to be there. But how do you hold him when he wants to act out, and remind him that he's loved, seen, not abandoned, you know, that he's got everything he needs, and that you can talk to him when he wants to lash out and to do these things that you've done in the past. Can you hold him so the man can shine and lead again, or lead for the first time, you know? And that was what was waiting for me on the other side. It was like more work, because it's always work, and putting to action, you know, who you truly want to be.
Take your power back from me means to be in my integrity, something that I was so far away from for so long. I got really caught up in the fast-paced experience of becoming famous really quickly. And boy, that took a hold of me. So take your power back from me means to be back in my integrity. It means to actually be finally in my integrity into a place that I have a further understanding, a deep understanding of what it means to have good boundaries, to have healthy communication, to show up with intentional energy into a space and to be responsible for my energy as well. And to remember that I never was in a place where I was having my power taken from me, but that I was giving my power away. And this is the reclamation part you're talking about for sure. And that I've been outsourcing my power for a long time, and not recognizing the power that had been attributed to me as well as a person on the stage, and the privilege that I have to be up on the stage, and the privilege I have to share my art that is born from pain and trauma and life experience. What a gift it is to have that. And I can say that through that journey of reclamation that I've earned that shit back.
Were there any women who came forward at the time that you did reconnect with and repair with?
Mm-hmm. Yes, there was. I'm not going to name no names, but...
Of course, yeah. I mean, protect their privacy, but what was that experience like in healing
really,
some of them?
Yeah, in a word, it was healing. You know, it was tough conversations, you know, and I think that one of the things that really felt affirming was that I had chosen women in the world that were mighty people, mighty women, strong women, you know, because they could be in a reflection space with me, you know, a container of love and have grace and compassion for me as a growing and young person, and still, you know, constructively criticize how I behaved in relationship, so that when we left those conversations, I could feel and know what things I'd done wrong, what things I'd done right as well, and still have a sense of myself from it.
What has been your experience of witnessing Naco evolve over the years, Natalie?
You're on the spot now.
He's always been a bit of a cunt.
Please use that.
I'm still a bit of a cunt. I'm sorry, but no,
Some things never change.
No, I mean, honestly.
Oh, now you gotta stop. She's ready to go.
The obvious, you know, personal growth that we all go through is there, as you would expect everyone to grow and mature and expand and evolve. Like, obviously, a lot of stuff went down with Naco, but for me, it was never part of the narrative, my narrative with Naco. Like, I never saw him like that. So I've known him and he's stayed the same. Nothing's changed for me with Naco other than we both grown up and doing the work and hard-working people, like musically and touring-wise. Yeah, we're serious about the craft and getting the music to people, so that's really clear, and that's why I like to tour with like-minded people.
Having gone through this experience, do you feel that cancel culture is helpful or harmful for our evolution?
It's harmful for our evolution. I think that call-out culture has a long history of being very productive for minority groups that have been oppressed or abused in some way. I think that cancel culture is a toxic arm of it that has gone astray from its original intention and has created a dogpile effect of chaos where the worst of humanity is present on the internet, and it is deeply oppressive and deeply punitive. It allows people to be the judge, jury, and executioner, and gives them the power to be really nasty and no space for them to be accountable for how they behave. What the band went through and their families was horrible because it wasn't anything that they did, you know. It was all mine. It was all my stuff. So to have them take it on was so shameful for me, and I felt terrible because they were facing the same kind of backlash. The things that they held and had to hold and still be my friend and my brother. I just want to give them a big shout out because it wasn't just the band, but it was other folks in our families and circles and their families and their communities too, to hold us all through it. And I just want to send them some love for that because it was a big part of our journey together.
How she held me in the dark, sharing every word.
To be on the Take Your Power Back tour now 5 years later is a deeply cathartic and spiritual experience for me, given that I wrote these songs, quite a while ago. The irony isn't lost on me, It's true, I did believe that I lived those experiences when I wrote them. The irony being that now, all this time later, the songs are alive in me, and I've truly lived those things now, and I really understand what they mean. I know now that Take Your Power Back is like my biggest lesson right now.
You got to take your power back.
I truly know now the power that's attributed to me as being a public person. I pushed back on that for so long. I was so stubborn and so selfish and didn't understand or want to have power. I had to reconcile what my relationship to power, to women, to control, to myself, to God, what was that?
Oh, that woman, she's testing me.
And now I know that to take that power back means to me how to be in service to those things and to be in healthy relation with those things and what that looks like, and really taking that into how I navigate my life now, how I teach my daughter, and how I show up to a place energetically.
You got to take your power back.
So my final question is another time travel moment. I'd love to go into the future to the wise elder Naco, and what does he want to share in this moment?
The first thing that I can think of is to assure that when you're going through what could be considered a breakdown, that it's important to hold the feelings of that moment and honor them. Don't get stuck there. Your perspective will shift. Give yourself the time to do it. But when you do shift it, remember, it can now be a breakthrough. You might be feeling like you're breaking down, but remember, it will feel like a breakthrough when you get to the other side of it.
My name is Nahko, and that was Medicine with the People.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow. Hit those buttons because it really helps a small channel like this grow into a bigger and bigger channel, and our reach will reach the world, el mundo.
That's it for this episode of Skylife. Thanks for watching, and the adventure continues. Bye.
Aloha.
This is what I wanna feel. All the way you know it's real.